Tesla has hit major milestones with FSD and Robotaxi, but the real investor question is, what's still missing and how soon do we get there? Elon Musk just dropped a huge clue. He said that for FSD, a model an order of magnitude larger will be deployed in January or February. He also said Tesla will add a lot more reasoning and reinforcement learning. That's not a minor upgrade, that's a step change. Our guest today, Hans Nelson, will help us get specific. What does 10 times larger actually translate to in capability? What does reasoning look like in real-world driving? What does reinforcement learning unlock that Tesla couldn't do before? And what are the final features FSD must nail before it's truly ready for unsupervised operation? We'll talk roadblocks too, the hard ones, edge cases, failure modes, safety validation, and yes, regulation. Fleet logistics like charging and cleaning matter, but at the end of the day, the key question is simple. When does FSD become 10 to 20 times safer than a human? Because that's the moment Robotaxi scales for real. Let's get into it. Hans is a longtime Tesla retail investor, analyst, and general AI commentator. Check out his YouTube channel where he does deeper dives on Tesla AI. And if you're buying a Tesla, use his referral code to get 3 months free FSD. I'll put that in the description. Welcome back, Hans. It's been a while. Thank you for joining me again today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Herbert. It's good to be back.
So one of the things that you do an incredible job with is explaining to, normal people like me, getting a better understanding. Because Elon speak when he says, there's going to be a 10 times larger parameter. When he says that there's going to be an order of magnitude larger program developed and deployed in January, February. So the most important question for us, Tesla investors is FSD safer than a human today? Is the reason why they're delaying it? Why haven't we seen 10 to 20 cities? Why haven't we seen truly unsupervised FSD yet? Is it because we're not there yet? And so forth. So I wanted you to explain some of the key terms. So the first one is what he just said. Basically, a week ago, he said that he says that FSD solved in his mind is practically solved. So I've had many debates with people. What does solved mean? But then he said that in January, February.
And how is it different this time than all of the other times that he thought, FSD is, 1 year away, max?
Okay. That's another nuance. And then he said that a larger magnet something will be deployed in January, February. Can you just explain what you think where we're at today?
Well, so honestly, that's an interesting statement for him to make because we've heard basically that exact same statement for most of the last year that, hey, this next 10x larger parameter model is, first it started out 3 times bigger, then it was 5 times bigger, and then it was 10 times bigger. And as far as we can tell, they have never actually shipped those larger parameter count models to users. They're obviously testing them. They're doing things with them in their R&D. They're doing lots of quality and validation testing. But as far as we know, none of those have made it to actual consumers. And so is this, hey, we think we're finally ready to roll out that? At some point, I assume what happened was that, and this is complete pure speculation on my part, but that in these larger parameter models, the reason that you have more parameters in the first place is so that you can have a better scenario handling for a wider variety of scenarios. You want to be able to cover all of the edge cases, all of the nines. And so the assumption is that, hey, if we give it more parameters, that's basically more memory that it can use to instantly be able to react to this situation or that situation that happens to arise. And when you have that much larger memory space, then when you move into quality testing, it's possible that what they ran into was, there's a lot more hidden bugs here in this larger hidden state, this larger memory that we have got to do more work on in order to refine all of those little issues. And so maybe that's the reason that we haven't seen this 10x parameter count upgrade. Or on the flip side, it could be that, hey, that was working just fine, but we continue to be able to improve our 1x parameter models and not have to use all those extra parameters to continue to improve the performance. And so there just isn't an engineering reason why we need to go ahead and move to that 10x larger model yet, because we continue to see progress that we didn't think that we could get just using the existing size of the model. And so, maybe it's one of those scenarios, maybe it's the other scenario, maybe it's a combination of both of those scenarios. It's hard to say, but eventually we do expect that we will end up having to go to a larger model. That said, when we look at just the overall AI space right now, there is this movement where, models continue to grow and grow and grow to push the frontier, but then the ones that actually get used in practice continue to kind of remain about the same size. And that's because, you have trade-offs. You can make these models bigger to give them more magical capabilities, but then you're paying in literal dollars and cents to have all the overhead of all these extra magical capabilities that you don't need 99% of the time. Every time you do inference on that. And so that's why when ChatGPT launched ChatGPT 5, and they're like, hey, this is one of our best models ever. And yet we don't really want to send requests to it hardly at all. We're going to have this special little router that runs in the background, and it's going to send most of our requests not to the new latest and greatest model. It's going to send it to other things because we really only want to use the big fat model as few times as possible. Only when it's needed, because every time you do a call to that model, man, the money printer just has to go burr in order to pay for that. And there, I'm sure, is somewhat of a similar engineering trade-off that Tesla is seeing when they're like, hey, we want to do these 10x bigger models, but in order to run these 10x bigger models, it really pushes the envelope of the compute that we have in the car. Maybe we're struggling with running that large model at the type of frame rates that we want to operate at. Maybe they don't want to run at 30 hertz and we want them to run, 30 frames per second. And so that could be an issue. And maybe they've figured out, maybe it's just been, hey, it's taken a lot more work in order to optimize every single step that happens in between the photons hit the cameras, then they get processed at the initial layer, some sense is made out of what it's seeing, and then that's offered up to another neural net that's trying to start making deeper sense of the scene, and then that is sent to the planner and all that stuff. And all of these, there's a whole sequence of steps in between photons in, and okay, here's the acceleration that you need to apply, and here's the steering angle that you need to apply. And in order to get all of those steps done so that you can do that 30 times every second, there's a lot of really grunt work, grinding, computer science engineering in order to get all that stuff to run on your hardware 4 computer or your hardware 3 computer, whatever it is. And so when you have the 10x larger parameters, maybe there's a lot more of, sorry about that. When you have that larger 10x parameters, maybe it's a lot harder to get it to run at 30 hertz. And now maybe they finally have done that for hardware 4. All of that to be said, the reason that you do that is because you think it gives you a big performance upgrade. And then in the course of AI research, what took you, 10 billion parameters to do this year, 6 months or a year from now will take you 1 billion parameters to do. That we figure out how to actually take the capabilities of these bigger models with more memory space and just smash them down and run them super efficiently and super effectively in a smaller footprint. And so, that's why that I think is several of the different dynamics that have led to, the messaging that we've heard out of Elon for the past year of we're going to do this 10x thing, we're going to do this 10x thing, we're going to do this 10x thing, and then we haven't actually done it yet.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, that's a good explanation. But so let's get right to the meat of it, though. Do you agree that the current version, not the 10x version, which could come in January, February, could actually be enough for unsupervised, basically nobody in robotaxis, roll that out in robotaxis? Or do you think that they're kind of testing it now, but they need to wait for January, February before they can truly do a scaled really paid robotaxi rides with no one in the car all over Austin.
Yeah, I think we probably do need to get a major version upgrade before you really want to start scaling. That I think that, just in my personal experience, and this is very anecdotal, it's hard to say with one person's subjective experience, my driving scenarios, but to me, I think version 14, if we play that forward 6 months, and on version 13 you got to the initial versions, you could see the sparks of magic. But then it took a while to get to version 13.2.9. And then, man, by the time they got to version 13.2.9, it was so smooth. It was so good.
Mm-hmm.
I think, if we play it forward and we get to the version 13.2.9 state of version 14, that version 14 will be better than a human at driving.
Human.
Yep.
And so that will be enough to roll it out.
Well, no, that's the question. I think it will be better, but maybe in the 1 to 2 times better than a human. And the question is, do you really want to start that scaling process when you're only 1 to 2 times better than a human? Maybe you really do want to make it into that 5 to 10 times better than a human range. And then you really start the scaling. Like, my just overall, I would be super happy if we reach the beginning of scaling robotaxi services by the end of 2026. Like, if we're really starting to roll out no drivers in cars in the thousands of cars type quantities by the end of 2026, I think it's highly possible that we could do that. It could come much sooner, but I would still be happy if it took us, until a year from now to reach that milestone, because we're still talking about something that, like, Waymo's not going to be deploying significantly more than that between now and the end of next year. And that's really the only competitor that exists, and their foundational technology still doesn't scale as well over time. And so if you are catching them and passing them in the end of 26, then by 2030, we're still in a crazy place where millions and millions of Tesla robotaxis have been deployed. And like I said, all of this could come faster than that, but it is like we're still in a phase of ironing out a lot of very difficult to pin down bugs, minutia, engineering details.
Okay. Wow. Very good information from you. That's that could reset what I was thinking. But I was going to also ask, on the other side of it, if he says, again, do you believe what he says? But if he goes, a larger model will be deployed in January, February, that is so soon that would they not already be testing that now? And wouldn't possibly the robotaxis in Austin using that version now? And that's why they decided to go ahead and start going nobody in the car anymore, because they feel confident. They've got data to show that that's actually working. We're testing it now. We're rolling it on Robotaxi now. You guys will get that. We will all get that in January, February. Is that a typical move?
I would honestly be surprised if those 2 vehicles that we saw driving around in Austin with 0 occupants, I would highly doubt that those are running the exact same software that all the other robotaxis are running that do have the safety monitor in them. They are probably an advanced version, and they've got the engineering tail car who's following behind them and doing the monitoring remotely. But more than likely that is whatever their version 14.3 plus, or it could be an early copy of version 15, who knows? But yes, that is going to be basically an alpha build of the Robotaxi software that they are doing initial testing on.
Okay, so it could come sooner. Can you explain? He also talked about chain of reasoning. I have no idea what he means by chain of reasoning. Can you? When he says reasoning, I think he's talking about obviously the car understanding the scenario, number one, and then making a decision what to do. Like, it's almost like, this is a fast food drive through. So I'm going to go and drive a little to the left. I don't know. You tell me, what does chain of reasoning mean?
So what it sounds like to me is that this is a set of capabilities that they are now building into the Tesla model in very specific scenarios where you're in, like, at the beginnings of drives and at the ends of drives. That this is still, on one of the topics that we're going to talk about is what are the things that are really left. And we have expanded now, beginning of ride to end of ride, park to park. But anyone who's got version 14 and is driving the latest version understands, yeah, the beginnings and ends are still rough. They're not really there yet. And so I think this chain of reasoning is something that they're adding to these beginning and end of drive things where you're off of the road, you're moving at slow speed, and all of a sudden you don't need to be processing 30 frames per second of driving data and making decisions basically instantaneously in order to stay safe. That you can totally stop and take a second if you need to in order to understand the world around you and then make an intelligent decision about what you want to do to park or what you want to do to exit this parking lot, whatever the case may be. And so for that, then they are doing exactly what a lot of the different LLM companies are doing, both XAI and, ChatGPT from OpenAI and Gemini, any of these models that you use now. If you say, hey, use the thinking model, well, instead of you send the request off and the LLM just instantaneously says, I think this is the answer, and just starts spitting it out, it will sit there and create a draft of a thought and then add another one and then add another one. And it'll sit there and process your request over and over and over and over again in a chain. So that's the chain of reasoning part. And a lot of companies have actually put a lot of structure in how it will move through that sequence of thoughts in order to provide you whatever your answer is. And so they're really incorporating that type of process from these LLM worlds into how do I actually drive the car in these scenarios where time is not necessarily of the essence. I don't have to make those life or death decisions as quickly, so I have the time available to me. And these are kind of complicated, weird things that, there's no easy rule that, and all of us as humans, like, you have to think about how you navigate parking lots as a human a lot more than you have to think about driving. That, it's easy to get into autopilot mode when you're on the way home and you're driving yourself and, I wake up 5 minutes down the road and I'm like, I'm going to the wrong place. Like, that's so much more easy to do on the road where you just understand instinctively and you're running completely subconsciously all of the process of driving. That doesn't happen to you when you're in the parking lot of Costco.
Right.
Like, I think you are thinking about every single step in Costco.
And the next step too.
And the next step too, and the next step too.
So if you're driving, the car is basically going to say, okay, what's happening right in front of me? And I'm going to make a decision what I'm going to do. But if you're in a parking lot, I remember one time Ashok just showed this thing where if the car's trying to decide where to park, it actually will run all sorts of scenarios. Should I go this way? Should I go right? And then even further, if I turn all the way around this way, where are the parking spots? Which one would I pick? It might have already decided all of those decisions. And then it goes, okay, let's go do that one. Like that.
Yes.
Yeah. So chain of reasoning, is that what's coming also? And then what is reinforcement learning in the context that he was saying that we're doing a lot more of that as well?
It is interesting. I'm assuming they're using this in the QA portion of the training phase. That is typically where you would do reinforcement learning. And so he may be talking about some of the scenarios we've already heard where they'll have a driving situation that they encounter, from real world driving data, and then they'll import it into a simulator and create a whole bunch of variations of that scenario. And then you feed that back into the training data and say, hey, like, here, let's try this model and this model and this model. Let's see how they do. And then let's even take data from that and put that back into the training data. Like, that is reinforcement learning. And so maybe it's just that they're scaling up the amount of that they're doing. That's what I would expect. And it's been interesting because it seems like Elon, a lot of what he's doing with XAI and what he's learning about training these AI models at XAI, as they're doing a lot of this experimentation and research there, is then informing Tesla AI's approach to building FSD as well. That, you know, they just announced that Cortex 2 is going to be 200 gigawatt cluster. Does that sound familiar? It kind of sounds a lot like Colossus 1. Oh yeah, that is, you know, basically the same size as Colossus 1. And so, you know, coincidence aside, they're going to be building a similarly sized cluster for Tesla to Colossus 1. And then the reinforcement learning, that's a big part of what they've been doing now at XAI as well. For, you know, they trained Grok 4, then they did a whole bunch of reinforcement learning to it in order to create Grok 4.1. And they're going to be doing even more reinforcement learning on it for the Grok 4.2 version that we're going to get here in the not too distant future. And so they're doing the same types of things for FSD, and it is going to be, you know, somewhat different. In the LLM world, you know, the types of reinforcement learning that seem to be working really well right now are software coding, because you can say, hey, generate this code, and then you can try and run it, and the code works or it doesn't. And so that gives you this nice reward signal to know, did you make it better, or was this, you know, a complete waste of time? You can do the same types of things for math. There are other areas where it does kind of work, but maybe not as well. And then what we know right now from Tesla FSD is that they have created this world model, and I would assume that they are using this world model very tightly in the reinforcement learning loop. And that's, you know, if you go back to, I should have actually rewatched that before our conversation today, but the presentation that Ashok had here just a few months ago or a few weeks ago, I can't even remember how long it was. And they did, you know, they have the whole graph, and maybe it'd be good for the editor to put that on screen of just, you know, them having inputs into their driving model, then their driving model processing the inputs, creating some outputs. Those outputs then anticipate a new driving state. That new driving state then goes into the world model, and then the world model goes back and it goes in this loop. So that is a reinforcement learning loop, and they can run that until they either encounter something bad that happens, or the driving agent is able to do the correct thing that they wanted it to do in the first place. And so, you know, you can imagine a situation where you are trying to get the driving agent to be much better at avoiding running over a pedestrian that comes out in between two cars at the very last second. And there's a whole range of types of actions that the driver could take. You know, you don't want to hit the person, and maybe you don't really have options or any good options. And so you've got a whole range of bad options that you have to pick from, but there's probably a couple of those bad options that are better than all the other bad options.
I see.
And so using this type of reinforcement training loop allows them to explore all of the range of options that the car could take in that specific scenario, and find which ones are the least bad ones, and then train that, and then use that data to feedback. Like, once you find the good data, then you take the good data, you put it back into the training data for your next big training run. And that's the type of thing that
this is all done in a simulation engine. They take real world data, then they do all sorts of simulation to it, and then they'll create all these scenarios, and then they'll do that. Hans, can you give me examples of what he means by sentience and reasoning? What does that look like in the real world? I mean, like, I think we like to point to the one, right, which is it recognizes that it's a toll booth. It goes there, it hears the transaction, and then it knows if the transaction has occurred because the guy says, "Thank you very much. Have a good day. Thank you. Your payment's done," or whatever words they use. It figures it out, and it goes, "Okay." The gate opens up, and he goes, "It's time for me to go," or, "Hey, they've not completed the transaction yet. I'll stay." That one example of that, or is there more? Can you give me more?
Yeah, that's one example. Another example, I think, is the note that they added recently for 14.2.1, where the car can actually see hand signals from other drivers better. Like, those are things that feel, it's like, oh, there's this one little detail in the whole scene that you're looking at that you as a human, to look for, exactly where it is, and you notice it. But man, it's been hard for these AI driven cars to know what to do in that scenario. Now they know. And so I think the feeling of sentience is just when the car knows exactly what it's supposed to do in any given scenario that it is presented with, and it does what you would expect it to do as if you're a good driver. Now, if you're a terrible driver, maybe your opinion doesn't count, but that's the feeling of sentience. And there's so many different things where it does, so many construction scenarios already where it feels like that. Scenarios where
I just saw one today.
Obstacle avoidance,
I think it was he was driving, and then a stoplight turned, so he was stopped. But then a train was driving, and a train was coming, and so the FSD knew to back up. So it recognized, hey, there's a train. Maybe I don't know if it knew it was a train. Maybe it thought it was a bus, but it backed out of the way so that it knew what to do. I mean, that's not something you can code necessarily. It seems to be something that needs to understand the scenario. It's reasoning, right?
And capturing the long tail of things, like, that's where you really get that feeling of sentience. Like, oh, it's not just that it understands how to do all the normal, like, everyday mundane things super well. It's that the random hard things that normally would be something that you would have to think about as a human, when it gets those things right, that's when it feels a lot more sentient.
Yeah, I've just experienced one where, like, the hand signals. My car hit the four-way stop first. The guy in front of me stopped after me, but then he starts moving. So my car stops, but then he goes like this. And then, of course, I was very happy that the FSD reacted pretty quickly as soon as he does this. There was none of this jerking anymore. Just, okay, it's my turn. Did you hear this, that they did something with FSD where it using the same cameras? Obviously, none of the cameras in my car changed, but now it can see better and it can see more things clearer. And so somebody was saying that means that it can now see through windows. So if you're looking at another car, it can actually see better what the hand signal is from the other driver behind their windshield. And it can now see through trees, so if you've got a bunch of trees on your car, it can see through that. It can actually see cars, what they're doing on the other side of that road, because they can see what's happening on the other side, that they can see a lot more clearer now.
I didn't know that there was, a change to, I don't know if that's a calibration issue for cameras or what, but I did read the notes in 14.2.1 that they had a better ability to deal with those things. And obviously that has to come from being able to see them. So that is interesting. And it makes you wonder, how much they can actually take whatever they've done to these hardware 4 cameras and send it back and do something similar for hardware 3 as well. But yeah, that is actually an interesting piece of information that I hadn't come across yet.
Okay. So what are the other features that you think needs to be, what are the next features that we're going to be shocked at? So, you mentioned that the, hand signals, great. It's got that now. It's got great understanding now, fantastic, of emergency vehicles. My car immediately moved to the right, and I'm like, what are you doing? And then after it moved to the right, like after it started moving, that's when I saw this cop car come screaming on the other side of the road with its lights on and bearing, but I didn't hear it. I didn't see it. And then I go, oh, that's why. And then I quickly looked around and there's no one behind me. So it was very safe. The car did that maneuver. but it was like very quick. So it's reacting really well to emergency vehicles. What other features are you thinking that it needs to be able to do?
Well, before we get to other features, I do think we also need to improve the consistency of, like, it is doing those things now. Maybe it does them all the time. I don't know for sure. So far, I've had exceptional performance on, say, school zones and school buses. But they need to continue to work on making sure that at the fleet data scale, that they're 99.9% effective at doing those things all the time. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I hope they are. So that's going to be one of the first big steps, is like these things that are new features that we're doing. We need to not only do them sometimes or most of the time, we need to be very reliable in doing them all the time. And not being able to be reliable in doing them all the time is exactly how you end up like Waymo, where, they do silly, ridiculous things quite often and get filmed doing it. And I don't think that Tesla wants to have the type of social media exposure that Waymo gets, even though the mainstream media doesn't necessarily amplify those Waymo stories. There's, quite a few examples that are out there. And if the name on those videos was Tesla instead of Waymo, that would be viral to the nth degree. So that's going to be a big one. I think that is going to be something that does make it harder to scale as fast as we would like the Tesla Robotaxi network to scale, just because there is so much additional scrutiny on the company. And yeah, working around that news media cycle is going to be quite a challenge over the next couple of years as this really rolls out. So that's one. And then two, back into your question about further capabilities. I think that, one of the things that we've seen is the addition of Starlink integrated directly into cars. I think that they would like to have a better solution for that, even if they're just doing expansion with Model Ys. I think they need something that's more integrated into the vehicle than, just having these modules kind of mounted after the fact in the rear of the vehicle, because that communication is key. They have got to have great connectivity. It's going to be redundant. It's going to have Starlink, and it's going to have whatever 5G or wireless, cell coverage. That's going to be a big thing. And then as far as features, we've really got to nail down those beginnings and ends of drives. Whether we're solving that through chain of thought reasoning, like we've talked about earlier, anything and everything that we have to do to throw the kitchen sink at getting the pickups and drop-offs to be super clean, super reliable, super user intuitive. That's going to be another major part of really making this thing something that can scale easily.
So the parking and the ending, that you were saying. So I know Waymo, one of the biggest problems that they're doing is they're parking at places there shouldn't be parking, red zones they call them, or something like that, or in front of bike lanes or things like that. And that's where a lot of real issues can be and risky for both parties, pedestrians and the car. And now that Tesla put in Grok, so I was wondering, do you think Grok was required? Because, well, Grok is not available in robotaxis today, and they're operating just fine. I walk in and I use my app, and then there's a screen at the back, and then there is a safety monitor, but they're instructed not to speak to you. So most times they don't speak to you at all, and you don't really tell them what to do. You don't say, park me there, park me there. They got nothing to do with that. But the car's doing just fine, right? You tell it where to go using the app, and then it goes and drops you off. And they're trying to figure out where in Austin are good drop-off places. And then that's where it is. Or they even put a feature where they tell you, oh, here's where the car is. Okay. So it doesn't need the Grok. But boy, with Grok in the car, Grok navigation, you can almost see where you walk into the car. And then the car says, welcome, Herbert. How are you today? And I say, I'm doing great, Grok or Annie or whatever. And then you say, please take me to the airport. Okay. Then it gets to the airport. Then you go, actually, I'm at Alaska Airlines or I'm at, American Airlines, not
Yep.
United. And actually, you know what? Park me anywhere that's safe. Park me now here. I don't mind walking. You can have that conversation with Grok now. And then that could be their solution to, or, you go to Target or Walmart and it's going to find a parking spot. And you say,
Hmm.
it's a really hot day, Grok. I want you to park under a tree I don't mind walking. Go park at the far corner, that kind of stuff. Or, hey, I do have handicap parking, so park at the handicap parking. It's okay to do that in Costco.
Yeah,
That solves
absolutely.
everything, doesn't it? Yeah.
That's going to be a big part of this. You can think of scenarios where that's only a partial scenario, like because maybe you in the car, you think you want it to do something, but you've also got to be able to incorporate what is the learning of the fleet. Like, has someone else told you, hey, go park over in that place, and then something happened, and because of previous fleet experience that no, you can't actually do that.
Yeah.
And so it does need to be the combination of being able to have a semantic conversation with the vehicle to give it some guidance, and then
The
some sort
vehicle talking back
of
to you.
the vehicle talking back to you, and Tesla having an ability to, you can think of it as maybe creating a
Yeah.
map that is specific to Robotaxi that has like no-go zones on it, or high
Yeah.
information markers, or something like that. And that is one of the things that I've been looking for a long time, is for them to talk about whatever that is. Like, we know for certain that Tesla's doing, we've seen the cars that are out there doing the LiDAR, low res LiDAR mapping of all of the areas that the Robotaxi service is operating in. So we know they have some sort of maps, and those maps have some sort of information on them that the navigation system doesn't necessarily have. And even just that, like, what are their maps and what are their custom Robotaxi navigation solutions? Because I guarantee you one thing, the Robotaxi can't use Google Maps to navigate, because that is the biggest problem that I think lots of people, certainly the biggest problem that I have
Yeah. Yes. It's
with
mapping issues.
FSD is where Google Maps is just being stupid. And then the car fighting with Google Maps is even more stupid sometimes. And that, they've got to have something there to solve those issues. It's not something that they give us a whole lot of information about. But those are foundational to a full 100% solution to the Robotaxi problem, because like any Uber driver
Yeah.
has a much more rich semantic understanding of the areas that they're driving their Uber than any of these Waymos or any of these other things. So that's going to be very important as well.
And one of the people that was in here in Tesla, a Tesla guy was testing Grok with navigation, and he found a bug just a few days ago, and he would tell it, take me to Walmart, and the car says, okay, I'll take you to Walmart. Got in my navigation, and then after about a minute of driving, it just drops the navigation. And then it's like, whoa, what are you doing? Why are you taking that turn? I thought you're taking me to Walmart. And he goes, oh, I didn't know that, you know what I mean? And then he was having conversation with Grok. It happened 3 times. So there's a bug there. Don't know why it forgot the
So is that
navigation.
if you leave Grok on afterwards for too long, or that's interesting?
I don't know.
Because
Don't know.
I always I've been testing it as well. And
But you always turn it off and say, thank you.
Usually, well, sometimes I forget, and then, something will happen, and then I'll say something in the car, and then Grok will start talking to me. I'm like, oh, I forgot you were still on, and I turn it off. But yeah, that is interesting.
But there was,
and it might actually be informative, because there have been times when I left it on and then it started wandering around and not following the navigation. And I wonder if leaving it on somehow introduces Grok's ability to interfere with the navigation.
Very interesting. Okay, so that's a bug. Something's going on there. But here's what really shocked me, and he showed the video of what him doing it. Because the car started to turn the wrong way, turned on its blinker, and the blinker's going on, And then he goes and says, why are you turning left here? Aren't we supposed to go to Walmart? And then they said, oh, I didn't have that in my navigation, but I just told you a minute ago, do you want to go Walmart? Yes, I do. So now, okay, are you sure you got it? I've got it. Then he says to the car, oh, you've got your left blinker on. Turn it off. Turned it off. I was like, what?
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. I'll have to do
Oh
some
my
more
God.
exploration on that in my tests now.
I'm going to play with that one too. That is so cool. Okay, so there's features that, but for them to roll this out to Robotaxi with no one in the car in Austin, you're kind of buying yourself time. But do you think that there's edge cases or failure modes or safety things that they still need to nail before they can do this? I mean, I don't think so, but are you of the mind that they do?
I don't know. I do think that we're going to hear, like, Elon's public commentary on this is going to continue to be aggressive timelines because he is pushing the team to get this stuff done as quickly as humanly possible. And until they offer him concrete proof of why whatever problem it is that they're going to solve is going to take X amount of time to solve it, he's going to, be pushing, okay, like, let's get this done next week. And then we say, okay, these are all the reasons why we can't get it done this week. And 10 of those reasons, he's going to be like, well, that's crap, that's crap, that's crap, that's crap, get it done. But then, maybe reason 11, 12, and 13 are legitimate and they've got to work through them. And, that's just how Elon operates. That's also how you make impossible things happen in the first place. And so this is part of, the process. This is what Phil Beisel talks about as the sausage being made. Like, you get to see the engineering process and you get to see the engineering management process that Elon's putting on display here of how you actually make these hard things happen. And so there's data that Ashok and the rest of the team are digging into every day and every week that, like, they have thresholds of where they need to get to in safety performance and intervention data and all sorts of other metrics. And those things have to get to a certain point before you can roll out whatever the next thing is. And so, like, those two things are going to be in competition. And Elon's not actually going to push something out until those metrics show that we're ready to do that. Like, we're not going to do anything unsafe, but he's going to continue to be like, okay, I need these numbers by next month, January. We're going to push out this 10x parameter model in February. Team, get on it. That's the thing that we're going to be stuck in. And so, like, that's a long way to say I don't really know what those scenarios are going to be, but I'm sure there's a tug of war right now in between get it done as soon as possible, and the data is not saying that it's done yet.
Okay. I think I heard you. I don't know if I want to hear you, but let me just get you to clarify. Do you think that the reason why they haven't rolled it out to more cities or more cars that are no one in them is because the FSD is not yet at safer than a human or 2 times safer than a human? That's what you're saying. And
I'm saying maybe it's not 5 times safer than a human or more. I don't know, like, safer than a human, 2 times safer than a human, half as safe as a human. Like, that's really kind of a gray area.
And what kind of human, right? Good driver human, average human. Yeah.
But maybe it's not better than a human enough to maybe that 5 to 10 times level where they're like, okay, I really want to start rolling these out in.
So you're yes. Yeah. So what would your prediction right now? I'm predicting pretty high confidence for me, December, that by the end of this year, before January 1st, before 2026, that they will announce at least one more city because it's supervised driving. So I don't know why they wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
I don't really have a strong opinion.
For 3 months.
One way or the other. Maybe, like, it depends on where the bottlenecks that they're seeing, what is it that they're trying to solve for?
Do you think that there's, so we talked about FSD safety, which is the number one most important thing. The next thing would be logistics. Like, you have to have the software, you have to have the app, you have to have people hired in a city, you need to start mapping that city, you need to have charging, cleaning.
Yep.
Some people are saying, I've heard them say to me that, and in their minds, FSD is not the safety issue anymore. What's slowing them down at this point is really operational logistics stuff that they need to do, replicate city by city, and that's why they've not rolled it out. Are you of that mind?
I would think it would be the opposite. I think if the safety of the system was solved and the operational challenges were what was not solved, that we would see faster pilot deployments in new geographies. Like they need, if that's the case, they need more experiments on how to accelerate doing that whole pipeline. So my thoughts are that it's more likely that they're just not as comfortable with the safety data performance yet as they need to be.
Okay, I think I'm going along with you at this point because you've kind of changed my mind about the safety. But I will say this: you have seen many Tesla executives, like more, not Elon, many of them come out in the last week saying something in the lines of slowly, then all at once. Autonomy versus autonomy. There's autonomy, but there's autonomy at scale.
Yep.
Like, one, here we go, count 1, 2, 3, go. Like each of these kind of statements by many Tesla AI people are showing you that they have this belief that it's going to be slow at first and then boom. Now that tells me that yes, maybe today the software today is not ready to roll it out like you're saying, but it also tells me that maybe they already see the end. They already see the software that they're using now is got 5 times safer than a human now, and they're just wrapping it up. And that's where maybe by January, February, when the 10X model comes out, like if I were them, I'm not going to scale the current one now. If it is true that in January, February, there's going to be a bigger, larger model, I'd wait for that one. They're probably testing that one now. That's the one that's going to. So if I had to guess, I would say that in March, they might announce, and then they're all going to be supervised for 3 months anyways. But then, boom, March, April, May, 3 months, boom, 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 everybody off, and it's all like done. So I kind of buy a little bit of what you're saying, but I also feel like it's not going to be till December next year. Am I off in my thinking?
So I think I would agree with you in a lot of ways. One of the things that Ashok and the team have great visibility on is, they know when did they finish the alpha version of version 13, and then how long did it take between when they got done with that until when 13 rolled out to customers, and then how long between there and when it was at 13.2.9, and like when did they know that 13.2.9 was going to be so good. And whatever that length of time is, like they have personal firsthand experience with whatever that gap is. And so they're able to see things today that we can't see today, that they're then able to use their experience to kind of project forward in time. So yeah, I think that is likely. And I'm not saying I think it will take until December. I'm saying like if it took until December, I would still be very happy. I'm giving them some extra buffer because I'm not Elon. It's not my job to motivate these people that if they can perform well enough to get this done within a year from now, I'll be ecstatic as an investor because, that means my 2030 valuation is going to be doing phenomenally well. I think we're going to see incredible things over the next 6 months. Like we still haven't even gotten to the point where 14 is, like I said earlier, the version 13.2.9 equivalent of version 14, especially with all of the additions that Elon said are going to be coming to version 14. So I'm really excited about those continued refinements. And then we're going to be, I know that we're going to be in a lot better place 6 months from now in terms of deployment of robotaxis. And we're going to have a lot more data on what is the scaling rate, what are the limiting factors for scaling, all of that. Like there's going to be some really cool things that we see. We're going to have milestones in Q1. We're going to have more milestones by the end of Q2. and then that'll give us kind of visibility into what we should expect going into the end of the year.
I've been having this conversation with a lot of people, asking them how many cars will be in Robotaxi network by next year, by the end of next year. I've heard some people say 40,000, and they defend it. They defend that. And others say 1,000. Of course, we had Morgan Stanley say 1,000. And then Elon just replied to Morgan Stanley's comment of 1,000. Or Sawyer said, I think it's going to be, this is off by magnitude. This is way more. And Elon agreed with 100%. It's going to be way more, kind of thing. So 1,000 is, in Elon's mind, way too low. But I guess this is Elon. He's going to say whatever.
Yeah.
Push a team. Where are you at? Given
so numbers of cars, it's really hard to say. This is the classic. We're trying to predict an S curve, and so where does it take off is going to have a big determining factor on where we're at by the end of the year. I think it's going to be largely determined by where do we start Cybercab production, because they're not going to want to have 5% or 10% capacity of production once they turn that line on. They're going to want to ramp that line up as quickly as possible, and they're going to want to utilize it as much as possible, and they're going to want to work through all of the bottlenecks. And so if we see Cybercab production begin before July of 2026, I would definitely expect tens of thousands of deliveries by the end of the year, somewhere in that 20 to 40,000. And that's just of Cybercab. So that it all comes down to, when does Cybercab production begin? And I think when Cybercab production begins will be dependent on how good is the FSD software, and how, they're not going to go ahead and turn that line on if they think they're going to be just spitting out a bunch of cars and then going and sending them to some holding lot and have, the classic aerial photography pictures of, parking lots full of Cybercabs doing nothing.
Gotcha. I agree with you. That's where I'm over 10,000 personally, but under 40,000. If they turn on Cybercabs in April, then minimum they're going to have 10,000 of them, and they're not going to build them if they didn't think that they would be able to use them.
I would say minimum. If they turn on in April, I would say minimum 50.
I know, but that number throws me off a little, right? That's too much. I mean, we all thought there were going to be 50,000 Cybertrucks, and there wasn't, because Cybertruck is so many new and just tremendous amount of new technology that caused some issues, and so they had to slow down build of that, and then they had to raise the prices. They couldn't reduce the prices, and so it was less than 50,000. Although the Cybercab is meant for quick and easy build and all, but it's a brand new process. They've never done a lot of unbox. They've never done a lot of the materials. This is all new. So theoretically, it's supposed to be faster, but I would expect the first year to be even potentially slower than usual. So 10,000, and then so when does FSD become 10 to 20 times safer than a human?
I would say definitely before the end of 2025, 2026.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we should be in between. We should be over 10 by December of 2026.
Okay, there you go. That's great, because hearing from you again have a better understanding of the technology, what they mean when they say these things. Wow, we covered a lot of ground. Well, what about Waymo? So just the comments on that, not the LiDAR debate. We don't need to do that. That's pretty silly at this point. But of course, there's a tremendous amount of people out there who still think LiDAR works. But I guess my question is more like, I'll give them 3,000 Waymos by the end of next year. 3,000 Waymos. They announced they make $350 million because they're charging more than $4 a mile. People go, oh, they're now in 10 cities. Yeah, but they're tiny numbers. 3,000. So they got, a couple hundred here, a couple hundred there. When does Tesla surpass Waymo? And you can look at it both on cars, and then you can look at it based on revenue.
I think cars is the relevant metric, because ultimately everything else is going to be a function of the number of cars. Like the number of miles that you can do, the amount of revenue that you can do is all a function of the size of your fleet and then fleet utilization. So like where you put them will matter too. But in the early goings, people will be able to get similar amounts of utilization because you'll be in high traffic areas. And yeah, I mean, if we forecast 10,000 cybercabs by the end of 2026, that will be multiple times larger than Waymo's entire fleet. So I would say sometime next year, Tesla surpasses Waymo in the number of cars. And then, yeah, revenue, miles driven, number of rides, all those metrics follow shortly after you surpass them in total
And
fleet
they
size.
don't need Cybercab, right? They can use Model Ys.
Yeah,
Tesla.
I mean, I think that we will see a predominantly cybercab. Like they're not going to ramp Model Y to large numbers. I don't think. We'll see. And it wouldn't hurt my feelings if they did. But it just seems like Elon is, pushing. He likes to focus on the right thing. And then, like, if you want to do something else after that, that's fine. But, like, first, you got to get the most important things right, and you got to do them, and you got to do them at scale, and then other things follow. That's the reason that he's all in on vision to begin with. It's not that, to have a very brief comment about LiDAR, like, there are things that LiDAR or radar give you that vision cameras don't. And maybe if you had an incredible driving brain and incredible ability to use cameras, you could be 2 or 3 or 4% better or safer if you could then intelligently incorporate radar data or LiDAR data. But you have to have the brain that knows how to drive that well to begin with. And you have to have, great ability to understand camera data first. And that, we are still solidly in the phase of, this is why to me it's silly for Rivian to bet so heavily on so many LiDARs and so much radar at this point in time. Is like, sure, like that's data. Well, they may be doing something else with that. They may be selling mapping data, and it may make financial sense for them to be putting these sensors in all these cars so that they can be generating data that they can then sell to all these other people trying to build their own self-driving technology. So I don't know, maybe it does make financial sense for Rivian, but from a technological standpoint, until you have a brain that can understand your camera data well and drive well, you're going to get way more bang for your buck improving your camera understanding brain and your cameras than you do in these other sense. Like those things can maybe give you marginal improvements, but it's going to be a lot less improvement for a lot more money than your brain and your eyes for a long time still.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's the same reason why it's like the cybercab is the future of the cash generation of Tesla. You've got to get that right before you can do Optimus. Like you need the cash printer of cybercab in order to fund the Optimus project. And so we've got to be extremely focused on making sure that we do cybercab, we do it well, we do it right. And then we can worry about, okay, do we really want, to have lots of Model Ys? Do we want to expand to a 6-seat, do Model YLs or other, like other people can handle those projects. But yeah, cybercab first. So that's my thinking.
It's a good thinking. Okay, well, you taught us a lot today. This is great. I learned a ton. Reinforcement learning and chain of reasoning, and then the features that we're waiting for. You put a little bit of make sure that we're not quite there yet. I think you're right. I do think though that they have seen the new version, the 10X model. But it's Elon, right? Until I hear Ashok say that they're working on a 10X larger model, like you said, in January, February, then I'll feel better.
Yeah, when Ashok says we're shipping 10X parameters, I'll believe it.
Then we'll believe it. I agree with you there. But then you're pretty confident. You said that 10X, at least 10 times safer than the human by the end of this year. And we'll watch closely the cybercab production, because I think you and I agree with you that cybercab production is a tell. If they're really going to do that, I think this is all a go for sure. Otherwise, if they delay that, then maybe say something about the software still not quite there, but it'll be done. It'll be done by the end of the year. Yeah.
Well, and the thing, the most important thing, just to remind viewers, is milestones are markers of progress. And the thing that we just like, as long as Tesla is making progress and they're making progress faster and they're ahead of other companies in the progress that they're making, then they're still the right horse to bet on. And that's the thing that I watch so closely. Like, they have a much more scalable approach to robotaxis than any other company, relative to Waymo. Waymo's got great technology and they've got a service that's operating. They've figured out logistics. They've done a lot of great things, but what they don't have is the ability to build their own cars. And they don't have a tech stack that is as cheap. And if we can see Teslas operating with no occupants inside of them, which we just saw this week, that is a proof of concept that they can do what Waymo is already doing with hardware that costs a fraction of what Waymo's hardware costs on vehicles that they already make millions of every year. And so their ability to outscale Waymo is essentially guaranteed. And so if you take that and you combine that with, okay, now you need to own a Tesla, you need to experience full self-driving, and you need to feel it get better every few months. And if you feel the car continuing to get better every few months, and we have an architecture that scales better than any other company on the planet, then you can have confidence that your money is sitting in the right place.
Gotta take that clip. That was a mic drop moment. Thank you so much, Hans. Fantastic. We got to do more shows like this where you teach us a little bit more about Elon speak, developer speak, Robotaxi speak. Very helpful for investors. So follow Hans. This is the kind of stuff that he does. AI in general, Tesla, of course, in his YouTube channel, Hans C. Nelson. Follow him on his X account. And then also, do you still have your code, your referral code? I'll put that in the description and people can click that if they want to buy a car. Really, we are at that point. You want to buy a smart car, not a dumb car. I'm telling you now, please. It's not a please. It's more like I'm trying to. It's like if I don't tell somebody, do not buy a dumb car anymore.
This is a public service announcement for you. Yeah. Like if you want to have an this is why so many of us have already purchased a Tesla. If you want to understand what AI is going to be able to do in the future, whether it's a smart car or not, like this is a foretaste of the types of things it's going to be able to do for all kinds of jobs over the next 10 to 20 years. If it can drive a car as good as an Uber driver and provide taxi as a service completely autonomously, like that is a job that millions of humans do today. And if AI is going to be able to do jobs that millions of humans do today, you should understand that they can do that. And you should understand how they can do that. And then you should have some sort of internal model of, okay, what is that going to look like in other areas of the economy, in other areas of my life?
The world's going to change
How is
quickly.
that going to impact my job? How is that going to impact my family? And so $100 a month to rent FSD on a car that you either purchase or lease. You can lease these things for as little as $300 to $400 a month in many cases, in many geographies.
Yeah.
That is a pretty small price to pay. And like, you don't have to use my referral code to do this at all. This is for you and your own education, your own understanding of the future. This is something that I think a lot more people need to do in order to have hands-on experience of the capabilities of AI, how it's changing, and what that means for our futures.
Oh my gosh. I just interviewed Gali, and before I interviewed him, I got a phone call, and the conversation was, oh my God, I think Tesla solved autonomy. And then it was, oh my gosh, what does this mean for cities? What does this mean about my real estate? What does this mean about where people go? Like the mind starts moving forward, because when you carry this forward, it's like autonomy. What is it? Everything changes. A lot of things changes. Anyway, so well said, Hans. Appreciate you. Let's see everybody. I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.